Welcome to Covering Our Bases. From Mets to Mariners, we break down baseball's biggest highlights and headlines with unique context from every MLB team's perspective. As we cover our bases, we aim to educate, entertain, and engage the average baseball fan who just doesn't have time to follow the other 29 teams around the league. Expect the fun storylines, patterns, predictions, and pageantry of Major League Baseball to be present at all times. He's Dastardly Dan Harrow. I'm Dub Sprizzles, Warren Sprague, and Dan. New to the spring training experience this year is the Prospect Showcase, the concerted effort of two teams to come together and put only their finest prospects up against one another, toe to toe. At this stage in your baseball fandom, I have some questions like, one, does this move the needle on how interesting these contests are? And two, how much does it really tell us about the farm system in each of these organizations?
Great question, Warren. It's the first year we're trying out the spring showcase, the prospect showcase. I'm sorry. So we'll see how people react to it and how it actually the prospects perform and if it makes for engaging baseball. But the idea, I think, is pretty encouraging. So spring training baseball can be very deceiving. People have not seen baseball for a few months. We get very excited and we tune in and we find that half of the big league major rosters are not there yet. The other half are only there for the first 2 innings, 2.5 innings. Pitchers are lucky to go more than two. They usually don't. And then it's a cycle of other position and pitchers. So we never really get to see like the full team on the field until opening day. I think that spring training is kind of people going in and out, looking at individual stat lines, not necessarily sitting down for a whole game. So then comes the prospect showcase. This is something where you know what you're going to get. You're not going to get the major leaguers, but you will get to see some of the brightest prospects. Well, not some of the brightest prospects that your team has to offer. So that's an
Hmm.
exciting opportunity to get to see some pieces that might be an influence on your team this year, maybe will next year. Also, it's an opportunity for them to kind of be starters on the team for a day and go up against another major league's best prospects. It's a great opportunity for them. It's an opportunity for the organization to see how these young players perform under the big lights. This is bigger than AAA, even though it's roughly the same player level. It's all of the top prospects from all of the leagues together. So, big opportunity for the players, maybe more of a sneak peek for the fans and for the organizations. I think this could have more people tuning in. I know I'm going to tune in for the Mets' first prospect showcase coming up
Hmm.
here against the Nationals. So we'll see how it turns out, but I think it's a really good idea, and I think if it goes well, we'll see a lot more of it in the future. Especially because there's this ongoing conversation about spring training being too long. We've seen so many veterans get hurt, and age is definitely a factor in a lot of those cases. So maybe spring training will be the first month just these prospects, a lot more of this, and then more of the vets coming in later on.
These are almost like the SAT tests of the spring training experience, making their debut, because all the kids get to show this is what we've learned in school, everybody. And now they flex a little bit over one another, and flex they have. I will admit, I mean, I already tuned in to see the Jackson Holiday and Paul Skeens matchup, that one at bat. I found a YouTube video just summarizing the 3-2 count before Skeens struck him out. And Skeens gets this good like belt shake, like his junk grew 3 sizes that day. Good for him, young
Whoop.
guys getting to swing some stuff, you know what I mean, and see where they all stack up. And boy, Jackson Holiday tried certainly, especially in those last two pitches to get a hit. So yeah, that's just a microcosm of the potential from the event, is watching the futures of these teams rub up against each other like they might somewhere down the line in the playoffs, if they get to mature with their programs into contender type players. So I get it. I get why there's an appeal. I hope you're tuning in while we talk today, Dan, because you were so kind as to save my home division as the last division for our discussion in these divisional breakdowns, and we opened with yours, and
Yeah,
arguably the recording we most regret so far.
100%.
Yeah, 100%, right? We were outdated from the word go. And it showed. But the fact is that you deserve to have some Mets content in the background while we discuss the AL West and our final divisional breakdown of this segment of our show. We promise as the season gets going, we will not only talk about, well, how patterns are progressing based off of some of the things we talk about in these primers, but we'll also be talking about some of the minutia of the meta of the sport as we know it, so that you listeners who might want to, well, think about how injuries or errors or maybe errors on the part of the umpire might impact the flow of the game. That's the kind of stuff that we'll also try to find during the regular season. So we're just getting started with our content despite this final divisional breakdown. And stay tuned for our predictions episode coming up next week. We also have some special guests, resident super fans of the Dodgers and Padres and good friends of ours will be joining us. Tell us a little bit about that, Dan, before we start breaking down the division.
Yeah, so the regular season is going to open a week before most of the games get going in Seoul, South Korea, with the Dodgers and the Padres. So pretty exciting. They're going to go over there and play 2 games. Starters already announced. So we're going to see uh, Glasnow and Yamamoto on one side. Uh,
Mm,
should see Darvish and Musgrove on the other side. Or, I mean, maybe Dylan Cease now, Warren? I don't know. We'll have to tune in and find out. But we thought,
yes.
what better way to get the season started than to break down the first series of the season? Is only 2 games. They're on at 4 a.m. local for me. I'm sure earlier for you, Warren. So most people are not going to watch these live. But we think we found 2 devoted fans that are crazy enough to wake up in the middle of the night to watch these games live. And they're going to come on and tell us about it. There's been a big rivalry between the Dodgers and the Padres in the past. So I don't know about you, Warren, but I'm hoping we get them to bump heads a little bit too.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun to be the one American League fanboy amongst a trifecta of National League headed baseball fans. And I know you're going to instigate some friction between our Dodger and Padre faithful. And I just hope they rise to the occasion. I know that Padre spokesman you've invited has quite the flamethrower type of analytical approach. He's going to torch that Dodger fan if he's not careful. So I guess we won't name names. I don't know, but we'll look forward to seeing them next week and
Tune
have a
in,
great discussion.
tune in next week for the big reveal.
Yeah, just they're
People you've
not
definitely
former
never
base.
heard of before.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
don't. These are not household names, are they? They are
no,
just
it's
folks we
Blake
like.
Snell and Adrian Gonzalez,
Yeah.
everybody.
Exactly. I was starting to think like we need to be careful here because we're not introducing, Manny Ramirez and some Padre. All right. Anyway, moving on. Let's
Yeah,
talk about my division, the American League West.
if we have to.
It's we have to, Dan. We have
Okay.
to. We have to because, this is an extremely cool division to break down, in my humble opinion. We have 2 teams whose momentum is really struggling, at least one that's making complete wholesale changes to their entire organization, including relocation in the next chunk of years, with the Oakland Athletics coming here to my hometown, Las Vegas. I mean, I know I'm confusing. I love the Seattle Mariners. I live in Las Vegas, and Oakland will be here. I'll be more tuning in to watch Angels and Mariners games in this household, so no big deal to me. But um, Oakland's building a whole new culture for themselves, but not necessarily are we excited about that here in this city. So it'll be really interesting to break down where we think they'll land. Los Angeles, the Angels of Anaheim should probably be among the first we discuss too, because boy, have they lost so much and replaced it with so little. But still, the sum of their parts could come together to be a team that surprises people in their own right, with a lot of exciting youth that I'm hopeful we get to talk about a little bit today. Don't forget that the Seattle Mariners themselves missed the playoffs last year, and I have a great little bit of perspective on what that felt like, missing that, and we'll talk about that and how much they've done to try to prime themselves for this year's playoffs. And then, of course, you have the Texas twosome, the teams that went neck and neck all down the stretch. There's the hosts of the American League Conference Invitational, the Houston Astros, who once again made it to that plateau before bottoming out to the Texas Rangers and the eventual champions, right? Those Rangers. So it's two of the better teams in baseball are sitting right there in the way of those Mariners, and I can't wait to tell you why we're going to come out on top. So there's your preview in a nutshell. Here we go. Dan, let's talk about the Angels. Let's get it out of the way. They stink in the corner, and, we want to grab some cologne, spray them off, and put them out in front of the fan base again and say, come on, this can't get any worse, can it? Maybe the biggest intangible at this point for a team that wishes they would lose their owner quite like the Angels do is the fact that Ron Washington is the new general manager, and he is poised to run a very different cultural ship from the Phil Nevins, and prior to that, the former Tampa Bay. Go ahead, fill it in for me. You know who it is. Joe Madden, right? Right. Those two did not leave the team going in the right direction and couldn't help capitalize on all this talent to make a playoff run. Maybe this is the year that Ron Washington comes in, changes the culture enough that they can do it, but probably not. Dan, what's in your gut about the Anaheim Angels in 2024? I can't wait.
Bad things is in my gut, Warren. Nothing good. Just the slight feeling of nausea and the acidic taste from losing Otani. It's not good, dude. And the thing I can hope for the most is that Ron Washington just comes in and holds some of these guys accountable, all of these players accountable. Creates a standard that I just don't think has been there. On the same team last year, we had Shohei Otani getting hurt and still hitting every single day and talking about how much he wants to drive the team for a playoff berth. And then we had Anthony Rendon, which Warren, we're going to do a whole podcast on Anthony Rendon at some point, so we're not even going to get all the way into it. But on the same team, and it just begs the question of like the culture of this team. And for me, that starts at the ownership. And you alluded to all the issues with ownership. I don't believe in realistic change if there isn't a change at that ownership. However, Ron Washington is a good place to start. And he can certainly, at the manager level in the clubhouse, demand a certain level of play and a certain expectation from all the players, and then hold them accountable to that. That'll go such a long way.
Here, here. I'm with you 110% because this is what the team needed. They needed somebody to come in and kind of just slash and burn the agriculture from the previous coaching staffs, and I think he's going to do this. Will Ron Washington? Everything he says is hungry and frustrated on behalf of the team and results driven. And I think he's going to police these players to be their absolute best. And it's about bloody time in Los Angeles that's what we feel around the culture of the lineup. And listen, to my listeners, to our listeners, this might as well be a 3-person conversation because my fiance, Tiffany, is a huge Los Angeles Angels fan. So I watch more Angels baseball than any other team outside the Mariners. And I like a lot of this young core, and I have no other platform to get to talk about it. So brace yourself, Dan, while I tell you that Mickey Moniak at right field, that Luis Rengifo now finally getting a starting role at second base to open a season for the Angels, that names like this are going to be what you hope to see and hear more often as we get into this new era of baseball for Los Angeles, because they're why we should be excited. Nolan Shanuel is a young first baseman for this team that I think will grow into a great rotational piece. Logan O'Hoppe at catcher is already a decent home run hitter and is projected to be among the top hitters for this lineup throughout the year. And finally, Zach Neto. Zach Neto is undersized, but awesome with the bat in his hands and a great defensive player as well. If he could stay healthy, he's going to put on a show at shortstop for the Angels this year. They have a lot of great young talent, which is what we would want to watch in the event that Mike Trout gets lackadaisical or injured, more likely injured. But lackadaisical is real too, man. I don't smell the fire and the hunger from him. I don't sense it at all for baseball like I used to in any way, shape, or form. But, he's saying the right things to the team. Meanwhile, though, I promise you, he's practicing his golf swing pretty frequently, right? As a matter of fact, he really swings at fastballs right down the middle and low into the strike zone these days more than anything because his golf swing is much more comfortable for him. And if this sounds like I'm talking some garbage, maybe I am. If I was paid millions of dollars to play baseball for the next 7 years, I would stay focused on it. At least that's what I would like to think of myself. Um, and
Warren,
then yeah,
I don't want you to worry about talking garbage because I'm going to apologize to you in advance for what is going to be the most contentious back and forth we've had of any of the divisions. Don't th- don't worry. I'll bring the garbage for the Angels. I've got plenty of it, and I know you're in a position to defend them, which is why I have some big questions for you on this team, if you don't mind.
yeah, I'm pretty primed for it. So I can't wait. Tell me everything you want me to do my best to defend about the Angels before you sincerely put them in a coffin once again.
I mean, dude, you're talking about the youth, and there's 9 first-round draft picks on this team, including on the bench, and a couple a couple more in the rotation. So I really question how much I'm trusting the organization, the same organization, and the youth coming through when 7 of these 9 were on your team last year. And we're not going to get too deep in injuries. Injuries is a significant problem for this team the last few years, but I'm not seeing the translation outside of Mike Trout from the organizational side, from a batting or a pitching perspective. This team has struggled with pitchers. There's a couple that are going to get bigger opportunities this year, but they don't have anything in their history. That Otani was not from their system. They went out and got him, obviously, but he's
Mhm.
not a drafted, developed player. I'm just not seeing it elsewhere. And then they bring in first round picks from elsewhere, and even outside of Rendon, it doesn't seem to have the same impact. It kind of goes back to some of the organizational things. But basically, what I'm getting at here, Warren, is I, you immediately want to put some faith and some trust in the youth, and you're absolutely right. They could do really, really well. But I think history is not on the Angels' side when it comes to this. And to have, even if you have the 1 or 2 young players like you're saying coming in, I'm not sure this is a great roster for them to join and to break into the bigs with. Not exactly the most inspiring names around. And like you said, Trout being a little bit more checked out than he has in the past, is he the leader that's really going to get the most out of these guys?
Right. And I agree with you to an extent where I'm disappointed in the Mike Trout leadership role. I'm disappointed in the Anthony Rendon contract. We haven't even begun. We'll wait a minute more. Um, I'm grateful that Brandon Drury's on this team, and I'm grateful Taylor Ward's on this team. I like both those guys as workhorses. And Taylor Ward is probably the true, I think, emotional leader in the locker room right now because he just came off a horrific injury. Did you recall what happened to him to end his playing
No.
time last season? He took a baseball to the face. It was
Oh,
pitched straight into his face,
it's the worst.
and he needed facial reconstruction. He needed facial reconstruction surgery,
Wow.
and that, you root for a guy just to not have trauma around playing
Yeah.
baseball again.
I could never get
But
up to the dish again if that ever.
I'm with you. I mean, I took a fly ball to the forehead when I was a kid, and that stopped me wanting to play baseball ever again myself. Like, my heart is with Taylor Ward, and he's here, and he's got a face still, and I'm happy for him on that it didn't literally change the way he looks, but he's here to play baseball as a professional again, and he was on a bit of a breakout year 2 years ago when he ran into a wall, literally and figuratively, and a concussion kind of derailed that season, and now this happens this past year. So I want the guy to have a healthy year of baseball to prove he's probably the glue guy on this team, and the de facto leader. But I don't like that Anthony Rendon is in this clubhouse, and I feel as if he's there, there will be forever a cancer in the Angels' aura. And if they're really serious about putting out a team that's proud of themselves and here to win baseball games, it starts by finding a solution that sees Anthony Rendon off this team. Period. Your turn. That's as clean as I can get on it. Let you have a chance before we really get gross.
It seems like definitely a lot of the interactions with the media have been blown up, and that Rendon has taken a stance to prioritize his personal life over baseball. And look, this is a guy who won a World Series with the another organization that drafted him, and then went out and got paid. And he got paid, and then he got hurt. And at that point in his career, he already had his championship on the shelf. He has a wife and a family. Like, I'm not gonna shit on him for making that decision. He's entitled to, it's his right to.
Mm-hmm.
However, to say those things in the media, and to, when they poke at you, poke back, is just a recipe for disaster. It makes you as a player look bad. It provokes the media and creates a vicious cycle. It just gets reported more and more. It frustrates the other
Mm-hmm.
players in the clubhouse because now attention is on that when it should be on the game. And the list goes on and on. So it's just bad for the organization. And I don't understand how, from an organizational standpoint, they're paying Rendon, let him play, but how they allow him to talk the way that he does, like, with, don't tell me there's no influence on the back end of them being like, bro, can you not?
I'm with you. Like, I don't know where the organization doesn't get off. Like, Ron Washington should just jump right on this and be publicly out there going, that's not the way we feel. That's not the way we play. If he continues to put that out there, it will show in his playtime, right? Whether he's injured or not. I do wish there was a little bit of that going on where Ron Washington says, no, 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 I'm here to walk what I talk, right? So I'm a little concerned about that. If like all of these comments he makes that seem so ignorant to the media, like, or the team behaving so ignorantly about it, I should say, is a mistake. So I'm waiting any minute for there to be some repercussions for that kind of thing if it goes one step further. But you're right in that the media is very good at extrapolating everything and making it look as out of context as it has looked, right? We've seen some of the other context for his, like, hey, the season's too long talk. And he knew as he opened his mouth, he's like, I'm probably going to get some crud for this, but we could shorten the season. Um, we may have a whole episode on that, I think, in the pipeline for everybody, by the way. So, um, the bottom line, though, is that I don't like him. I don't think his on-field play is worthy of his contract, and I think his off-field drama is anything but worth his contract. So I still feel the team needs to crack down on him and hold him accountable, and he needs to be the piece that sees his way out. They have a pretty compelling young player. I'll just circle it back to why I do like this team if everything falls perfectly into their cup to be perfect, which is not possible. They will not make the playoffs, in my humble opinion, but they could at least expect that this young kid, Ahir Adrianza, and forgive me on the pronunciation, not sure how to say Ihire, his first name perhaps, but I saw him play in spring training, and kind of like Eloy Jimenez, he's been raking. He has been raking, this young kid, and has hit one on the Giants when I was sitting in the stands, and he's hit a couple more over spring training. So keep your eye on him to replace a Rendon as soon as Rendon, oh, I don't know, stubs his toe or gets green elbow from landing on it, or whatever he justifies as an injury to keep him from playing here in the very near future. Um, but the toxicity in this system is there as long as he is, and it begins with getting rid of him. And I'm counting the days. And we haven't even talked about the pitching a ton.
I
The
was gonna say,
pitching
Warren,
is
it's actually a little better.
the pitching is better. Yeah, the bullpen got improved. I would like to say that bullpen improved. They brought back Matt Moore. They brought in Adam Simber near the over the offseason. They got Jose Cisnero as well, who's leaving Detroit for them. Luis Garcia was another addition, And they do still have Carlos Estevez, who had a surprisingly strong, at least first half of the season last year. I didn't think of him as a top shelf closer, but he played well. And his rotation, or your rotation out in Anaheim, does have Reed Detmer still, who's about ready to mature into the pitcher he's going to be for the rest of his career. Here around 25, we should get a sense on his ceiling, but he's kind of the ace for this group at this point. Griffin Canning, a veteran who's been playing for a while. Sandoval is still part of this team. I like Patrick Sandoval, if you don't mind me saying. He's maybe my emotional favorite on this starting rotation. Tyler Anderson's proving to be full of holes here in spring training, so I don't expect him to be an X factor a ton. But if he can stabilize himself, he's obviously the veteran arm on this rotation. And finally, Chase Silseth. I didn't have a ton of faith in him, but he did strike out Otani. He struck out Otani this spring
Well,
training, so you got to give him
Tony's hitting
credit for
like
that.
500 right now, so
Right. So, I know a young pitcher named Tyler Miller, if I'm not mistaken, pitched past Otani for Seattle too. But the point is that whatever, you can at least get somebody out, and that's quite a somebody to get out. But I've taken too much of the spotlight. Continue on. Forgive me. How do you feel about what I've harped on about the Angels at this point? Anything new?
yeah,
Anything to
you're right,
comment?
dude. They are they have all plus war guys in their rotation. I mean, it should be pretty decent. There is some youth that will get an opportunity, like you mentioned, and they unfortunately that might be kind of a make or break for them because it might be a lot of innings that those guys end up getting. But the bullpen's much improved from last year, and that was a major source of a lot of their problems. Robert Stevenson as a closer is pretty solid. Can't complain too much about that. Like it's really going to be the health of all of these guys that's going to matter the most. If this team can stay mostly healthy, then I'd say they're arguably competitive. But that's been the thing that consistently has not even a problem. More in like every year, health has been an issue for major pieces of the team, multiple pieces mostly, and it's more than a trend at this point. It's concerning.
Oh, well, there's plenty concerning about Los Angeles. And thank you for bringing up Robert Stevenson, who I guess looks as if he's going to be injured here at this stage
Oh,
of
darn.
spring training. Maybe and hopefully will be healthy enough to get into the season soon. But yeah, there's a lot of trending downward as far as injuries are concerned. Health is very much a concern for this team all over the place. Culture more than anything. So Ron Washington is a beginning, but now he needs to put his money where his mouth is and walk his talk and get Anthony Rendon to do the same or move him out. One last player I want to say out loud: Joe Adele is out of options for this Angels team and has been doing very well for them offensively during spring training. So I root for him to make the team and make an early impact that could really use him because he's a well-built athlete. He's got a lot of power and his defense has improved. And if he can finally stick to the major league lineup, it's because he's proven he can consistently provide offensively, and that's what they would want him for. So go for it, guy. I wish for Joe Adele to not find his way off this lineup, but I just want to say that before we put a pin in where these Angels stand until the end of our breakdown, but move on to our next team. Any final thoughts? Did you really get to burn these Angels alive? I didn't feel your heat.
I mean, the other thing, primarily the injury thing, I think is a longer conversation because, to be honest, I think if you have that much of an injury problem all over, I think that's a conditioning and a training issue. And
Mm,
I would legitimately question the amount of money that the Angels are putting into those fields, trainers, equipment,
hmm.
process, and stuff like that, because you just it's at a higher rate than any other team. It's unusual. It's a consistent problem. So I would question that. Um,
Well, would you put it past an Angels organization that got a lot of flack just a few years ago for having these overcrowded dormitory like sleeping conditions for their spring training arms, right? Wasn't that just
yeah,
last spring?
yep,
You
exactly.
know,
It feeds into the same conversation, and if it really, from an organizational standpoint, which all this stuff keeps coming back to, this is a team that failed to build around Mike Trout for years, took chances on pitching for years that never panned out. Just a abysmal deadline and post deadline transactions last year, like sad save pennies on the dollar moves, gave up
Mhm.
on Otani. I mean, the big thing is Otani's agent gave the Angels the contract that the Dodgers had offered him. They gave
I
them a
forgot
chance to
about this.
match,
Yeah.
and they said no,
No.
Warren. Like
Yeah.
it, if you're really committed to winning, you have Rendon who might rebound. You have all these prospects, and you have Trout. Why not pay Otani all the money in the world? Who cares? It'll be worth the amount of revenue he brought in from Japanese sponsorship. I'm sure you've seen this in the ballpark. It was a massive amount of sponsorship, especially when he was hitting and pitching. That alone is going to offset so much of the cost you're paying for him. It's still in LA. He had every opportunity. He's like, so to me, it's just there's a countless list of ways that this ownership group and organization could improve the team, could have been better, could have maintained a better organization. And they've just failed to do it consistently again and again and again and again. I don't feel bad for them. I feel sad for them and for their players and for their fans. Like I can't imagine being a fan and you have one in your household, Warren. It must be tough. It's kind of depressing.
It is because, my sweetheart got me back into baseball. She's the reason why I care as much as I do, and that's not me just sugarcoating it. So I want her to have I want to have exciting banter with her back and forth about which of our teams is going to be more successful, like we kind of had last year. And we don't have that this year because she's a little brokenhearted, and I am for her. I want to stand on a
We all
pedestal
are.
and, yeah, root for a team that, has plenty of pieces on the field, but there is something rotten about their infrastructure, especially if it's going to make a player like Mike Trout want to, let's think about that. I'm sure he loves baseball so much, but maybe he's falling out of love with the organization of baseball. He remains loyal out of the goodness of his heart to the team, but he he might be getting a little fed up with the toxicity of the entire, organization. He just won't say that to our faces. So it's a real potential, you're right, iceberg, right? We could dive into the water and find a pretty dark depth for the Angels at the moment, but we won't because we've already focused on how bad they are for long enough, and we will move on to our next American League West contender. Now this team, you know, they host the American League Conference Invitational, is the joke here or there that I've heard. The Houston Astros are the most dominant team in the American League West's history, at least over the last 10 years. And, we could argue that there isn't a ton convincing us that it's about to slow down. They they didn't do it as much as some of the other teams in this division to improve or at least change as some of the other teams that we'll talk about later. But the Houston Astros are my mortal enemies. I hate them. I'm supposed to. In this house, we especially have this fantastic, very simple slogan, and it starts with an F word and it ends with the Astros. So I'm not like
It's a
a
fire
fan
truck.
of fire truck the Astros. You know, it could be feather the Astros is actually what it is. Feather the Astros so they can float away. I want them to gain lightness and off they go. But fire truck's not bad. Um, I'll justify it some other day. But I don't like this team and I'll never like this team, but darn it, they went and they got the best closer in the game to put on top of Ryan Presley, which is crazy. They now have maybe the top two closing pitchers in the league, especially now that we've talked about everybody else. Can you really imagine a tougher 1-2 punch to make up the back of a bullpen? I cannot. Um, Other than that, this Astros team hasn't done a ton to change, but why would they? They were in the American League Conference Series again and almost went to yet another World Series and, could have potentially won that since the Arizona Diamondbacks went on to kind of struggle in that series. But they were still west in this division or they were still first in this division last year with a 70-72 record, only losing in Game 7 to Texas after a hard-fought matchup. Very much could have gone the other way. They've lost Martin Maldonado, who's aging and will now go help stabilize the Chicago White Sox culture. Michael Brantley retired, one of my favorite clutch hitters. Even though I don't like the Astros, I liked Michael Brantley. I had a lot of respect for him. Ryan Stanek came over to the Mariners, as we'll discuss later. Phil Maton also left this team, as did Hector Neris. So some pretty important bullpen arms, when you say, are on the way out threefold. And instead, all they've added is one mighty bullpen arm in Josh Hader and brand new backup catcher, I would say. I think he's the backup at Victor Caratini to fill that role. What do you think of the Astros? Are they ready to continue to assert themselves as the best team in the American League with these very small changes they've made?
Yeah, they did win the division last year despite losing in the championship series and then um, losing the championship series to Texas, who went on to win the World Series. So, uh, weird year for the Astros coming back with the division crown, but with the World Series champion in their division. I can't say that's happened to them before ever. So,
Right.
yeah, they probably have a chip on their shoulder and are wanting to not only win the divisional crown, but lock it down in the postseason again. And you're right. Lost to several big names out of the bullpen, but replace them with Hader. And dude, how can you argue that they're not better off? I mean, you mentioned Presley, but Abreu's right there too. Those are your 7, 8, 9 guys that you can kind of roll out in any order. Like Presley and Hader, especially interchangeable, with probably Hader in the 9 spot. You still have a strong starting rotation. And now all they have to do is get to 7 innings, and the rest of your bullpen is just sitting there watching, not going to be working as much. So, yeah, it's hard to say. One injury could have, of course, changed all of that, but definitely, I think Houston is maybe not better, but as good as they were. Trying to start the year with Verlander, who is injured, but still, even without Verlander, really strong rotation. And Warren, we should just get this out of the way because I just saw like there's already talk in the likely event that we are immediately outdated. We should just say right now that Houston is connected to Blake Snell, and that there is a chance that probably right after we release this, he signs with them. So with yeah, I just saw it, dude. And with Verlander being hurt, that is
Oh,
that is a great that is a great addition. And then I'm looking at it, man. If he slots in, Verlander's gonna come back. Do you remember Lance McCullers Jr., Warren? He's gonna be coming back later this year.
mhm.
They have depth at the starting pitching position, almost to the point where it makes sense why they let some bullpen arm guys go because they're gonna have some starters in the bullpen from the looks of things, Warren.
Oh, my soul hurts. Are you serious
Sorry.
that Blake Snell's about to go to these Houston Astros?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh,
Hopefully not. But
man. I'm glitching out. I'm so upset right now. That is so not good. But okay, whatever. Moving forward, Blake Snell's not on that team right now. So I'll talk my garbage that I can, while I still can. Yeah, I hate this starting rotation so much because they're so effective enough that it bothers me. Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, Jose Urquidy, Hunter Brown, JP France. Not a whole lot to sneeze at. I would say their top three is already so darn strong. You get a Blake Snell, you really do put a underline under all projections of dominance here. Ugh,
we should just
that's
say that a lot of the Snell talk is coming because Urquidy's dealing with arm soreness right now. So now with
oh
him and Verlander potentially missing the start of the season, it's not a death blow, but it is a pretty significant step back. So you could see Houston making a signing to make up for that.
Sure, you can. Good. At least somebody's hurt. But, this is a very strong starting three with that. Um, Blake Snell, Framber Valdez, Christian Javier would be a great, starting three in any organization. I don't have a ton of actual fear of Hunter Brown, however. I do know that he struggled as the year went towards the Twilight era last year. And I don't think he really rebounded in the playoffs. So I'm hoping that Hunter Brown and JP France are still um, not quite the scariest 4 and 5 that I know I'll be comparing my starting rotation to in a few more discussions here. But yeah, Houston's scary. Their bullpen is scary. You have a great point of how strong they've become with Josh Hader there. Brian Abreu is still excellent. Rafael Montero is a wonderful fourth bullpen arm. And this team is scary unless you run ahead of them early. But it's hard to run ahead of an offense that includes Jose Altuve, newly extended. Yordan Alvarez, the bane of my existence, the anti-Mariner. Yordan Alvarez, I respect so much, and I feel like he might be the best power hitter in Major League Baseball. I'll just say it out loud. Alex Bregman, finally, in his last year with these Houston Astros before they might pursue an extension with him, is an all-star in his own right. Kyle Tucker, another all-star right fielder, can do it all, off and on, great defender. Jose Abreu, another great muscle man in this lineup, crushing balls all over the place. Yanni Diaz has cemented himself as the catcher of the future and why Martin Maldonado gets to move aside. And he will be capable of hitting probably about, 20 home runs, it looks like, projected. He's got one of the higher slugging percentages on this starting lineup. So Chas McCormick, Jeremy Pena, Jake Myers, a trio of excellent players, still under 30, still with years of experience. Jeremy Pena was their World Series MVP just 2 years ago, and he was but a rookie, I believe. So they're ready to go toe to toe with anybody, and I hate saying it out loud, and I don't want to, but they're still the Astros, and they're still the best team, perhaps in paper, and I'm gonna be trying really hard with my Mariners argument here in a few minutes, but boy, is it taking a blow if they grab Blake Snell. I'm super salty.
Yeah,
Grrr.
you go crawl into a ball in the corner, Warren. We'll be here waiting for you. But
I wanted Blake to go to the Giants so bad.
Didn't you want Blake in Seattle?
Well, yeah. I mean, in a perfect world, but in a perfect world, but there's no reason for him to give that discount, and the Houston Astros are going to prove that. They're going to pay him.
Yeah, the Astros were not let down by their bats last year. They were let down by their bullpen, and they've fixed that. So they bring back most of the same bats. And this is a team that has drafted so well, Warren, over the last few years. They've locked up a few of those champions, and they have so many of these younger guys. And a lot of people would say they're squeezing and they're stretching the window open. Nah, man, their window's open because they have drafted and developed in a way that it can continuously stay open. They still have prospects in the pipeline. I mean, and then they make moves like this, go out and make big signings that just help keep them at the top of the division. Like you mentioned, there's other teams that are trying to get better. Texas took a step last year. Seattle's trying to take a step this year. Houston, like we see the Twins in the last division, Houston's not hanging on their laurels. They are pushing aggressively. They do not want to give up the division title. So yeah, their comeback are a super strong group. Definitely expect them to be at the top. The pitching health is really going to be what kind of leads this team. Obviously, we saw the bullpen sink them last year. If they don't stay healthy on the pitching side of things, they will definitely suffer for that. And there's a couple other teams in the division that will be right behind them to grab at them if they do and steal that division crown.
Well, yes, they are. There's plenty of them ready to fill in the gaps. And there was a lot of dichotomy to this division last year with 3 teams finishing, a game or two separated from each other. So we know the great equalizer can be health, and health can make any of these teams take a big step forward or back. But we're talking about a top shelf team in Houston, and there's no doubt about it. The organization is strong and extremely difficult to catch, and they keep on setting themselves up for success. Their bullpen is you're right, completely fixed, at least on paper, with health not getting involved or anything else. We've talked a little bit about how friction could blossom between Hader and Presley, or at least Presley amongst the Astros organization because of a decision like this. But when you're trying to get back on top, having 2 guys of the caliber of Presley and Hader is just icing on the cake and maybe just a means of tightening up your chances of winning when it matters most, and you got to celebrate that. You got to love that. If you're Presley, just be grateful you got somebody else who could take the blame, right? If you can't close out a game.
Yep.
But yeah, if they stay healthy, they're scary, and we know that. So, okay, Houston, touche. If you sign Snell, you're still the best team in the division, but this is an extremely tight division amongst the three teams that I think have a chance to win it more than anything. So, Houston, ugh! Fire truck the Astros, man. Fire truck the Astros.
Houston, we do not have a problem. Everything is
Okay.
fine.
Thank you. All right. This is definitely where I would love to hear a da-da-da-da-da-da, because I'm done talking about these Astros right now. I'm ready to move on to our next team, and the next team is got to be our defending champions. No, they're not. I'm ready to move on to our next team, and our next team is the Oakland Athletics, soon to be the Las Vegas Athletics. You give it a couple years. Renderings came out of their new stadium, by the way. I don't know if you've seen any of that.
Cool. Yeah, they're gonna have like, it looks like an armadillo, but they're gonna have like the board basically on the ceiling, taking up looks like an entire, like, the first base line. It looks very cool, but I can just imagine sitting along that line and being like, oh, who's up to bat? And looking straight up in the air, like
Yeah, it's interesting how it draws your attention away from the field. And it has a beautiful window looking out over the Las Vegas Strip, prospectively, and it is getting a lot of comparisons to the Sydney Opera House architecturally, and I love that. And I'm, as a baseball fan, just excited to think that maybe I can go and work there someday. I'm just going to manifest that. I'd love to end up being a voice of the Athletics in some way, or
you know, work for a division rival, Warren.
I would work for baseball. I want to work for baseball. And if that's how I do it, that's how I do it. But the point is I'll still be a ardent fan of my Mariners, regardless. And I know I can't wait to go and see some Angels games there too. It'll make it so much nicer to not have to vacation out of town in order to take in some Major League Baseball. So there is that, in a nutshell. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This Oakland Athletic team right now doesn't have a ton to offer a fan base that still needs to be grown in this city. I'm a little concerned about how we as a culture in Las Vegas will embrace the Athletics with a lineup that is clearly made up of pretty much exclusively young prospects and players that are still trying to prove they can find a home on more established and exciting baseball franchises. We want to talk about ownership, though. Maybe we'll focus there first. We began by scathing apart the ownership of Artie Moreno over the Los Angeles Angels. This is another team that you would argue has the worst owner in baseball. Chat on that, maybe, to get us going.
Yeah, everybody knows about what's been going on in a rough sense of the possible relocation of the Athletics to Las Vegas because they can't come to an agreement on a new stadium.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of minutia involved in that. It's a constant back and forth. And honestly, Warren, you've maybe seen there's been a lot of doubts from the Las Vegas side already about ownership and some double talk by the mayor and already a lot of nonsense that was happening in Oakland. And this is something that this ownership group and this owner does. For some reason, it
Mm.
causes a lot of issues and a lot of problems. This is a team with a rich history that's won several World Series, that's fielded really good teams and has taken a
Mm-hmm.
distinct line to cut payroll. They were lucky enough to have Billy Bean and to put really good teams on the field without payroll. Billy Bean's still there, but they're not fielding the teams that they used to, and it's becoming apparent. I question
Mm-hmm.
why he's still there. Must be something else behind the scenes because people are hoping that by bringing the team to Las Vegas, they can make more money and hopefully field a more competitive team. I don't know about you, Warren. I don't see any promise of that. I don't see any indication from the current team that that might happen. And it's the frustrations with the owner, the existing situation in Oakland, and what they might bring to Las Vegas. Like, what are they going to be expecting? Is this going to be a playoff team ever? Or are they really content just having a major league team in a city like Las Vegas where they can sell tickets?
Well, it seems as if it is the latter right now, where they're just excited at the idea of cash grabbing a couple seats, in a beautiful state of the art stadium, arguably the fanciest in the history of the league.
And
You know,
small, we should say. Like it distinctly sits less people than a majority of parks, which is odd.
that is odd, but maybe that's them trying to recognize that they don't have a huge fan base clamoring for this, and they're really going to be relying a tad on tourism, right?
Mhm.
Maybe relying a tad on the Angels fans to come for a weekend and enjoy a series. Or we do get lots of visitors from the Washington area and the Texas state. So you're gotta hope tourism will work, and that's worked well enough for the Raiders, I would say. Not that
Yeah.
there's not an ardent fan base at home that are attending those games, but I would think it's more tourism. So there's an argument to be made that it'll be okay, but I do think of all of the sports ventures that this city has done in the last 10 years, this is the riskiest. This is easily the riskiest because we may not embrace, certainly as a Las Vegas culture, the athletics, and I'm not excited for them at all for any reason except that they bring Seattle and Los Angeles here a little bit more often. Um, well, 120% more often, right? Like, obviously, now I get to watch baseball in my home city. So that's why I'm excited, period. I'm not excited about the Athletics. This lineup, it does have a few pieces that, if you're playing MLB The Show, you might have on your prospects list or in your backups, like Brent Rooker. Had a great year last year and was their all-star, homered plenty of times, and is projected to hit about 27 this year. Um, Not enough to be like, a 30 man or a 40 man, but he is a great slugger for this lineup. Seth Brown is also a quality veteran, one of the few who've been able to mature with this team, having been drafted way back in 15. Zach Geloff is maybe the best player overall, I'm reading about this lineup. Second baseman is a quality contact hitter, does slug occasionally and can hit maybe 20 DNRs himself this year. He was drafted second round, so he isn't a homegrown star for them. But other than that, there isn't a whole lot. I've watched Shane Langoliers play, for crying out loud, at the Las Vegas ballpark when he would represent the Aviators. And so I know that he's, a middling of the lineup bat, and has upside at 26 years old and can still mature into above average overall player. And I do notice that Abraham Toro, who had some clutch moments for the Seattle Mariners 2 years ago, before I think he played for Milwaukee last year, and now is settling in with the Oakland Athletics to just have a starting role. I think, I think he's not even really an above replacement player or anything like that. Probably an average player, but this is one of the only lineups where an average player can get a starting spot. You know what I mean? And that's just the lineup. So, any thoughts on their offense? Have you heard anything about any of these young guys, or am I just rambling on to know about no names in your mind?
I literally recognize one of the 9 names you said. So I think that pretty much says everything you need to know about the Oakland Athletics this year.
Yeah,
There are more names in the pitching staff. I mean, I know that they got Alex Wood and Ross Stripling, and those are names. That's good, but yeah, I don't see anything else on this roster to be excited
and you
about,
could
really.
and you can argue if Alex Wood and Ross Stripling are even exciting aspects of this. If they're even really really good news. So Paul Blackburn also remains on this rotation, and he's not been somebody who inspires a lot of excitement or trust. JP Sears and Joe Boyle don't bring a ton of memorabilia, or excuse me, a ton to remember out of what they provide on the diamond. So it's just, yeah, there's not a team here that's going to win much this year and into the future, and the perception of it is that there's no reason to expect them to be treated that way. I'm going to argue that when they do come to Vegas, Dan, when they do see what their first year of buy-in is like, or lack thereof, I think that's when they're going to want to put on the gas again and really say, "No, we promise. We brought a team here to contend." So
Hope so.
yeah, I mean, we noticed that when the buzz got to the point where a relocation seemed inevitable, we noticed how Oakland stopped carrying any player with merit, right? They got rid of Olsen, and they got rid of Simeon, and they got rid of Will Smith, and so many great players who are doing great things for great franchises right now. So we know that they know how to pick up the pieces. They're just not interested in doing it right now while they figure out all this ownership turmoil. There's just too much noise in the background. So, this Oakland team, the question I think we need to ask ourselves in this podcast, Dan, is if this is going to be the worst Major League Baseball team in the history of baseball.
I was gonna say, are they gonna win less games than last year? And they won 50 games last year. I think there's a chance they could win less this year. And that's not to say these are all bad players. They're not. They're just young and inexperienced, and there's not a lot. Like usually, there's at least one solid position or starter or star, someone you can look to, and this team just does not have that intentionally, as you allude to. So, yeah, I think they could easily win less than 50 games this year.
I think you're right. And I think that's where we should let the dog die. Because right now, the dog wishes it was dead. So,
Yeller, no.
yeah. Yikes. We are. Old Yeller and Green over here just got put down. And that is the last time we reference depressing ass dog death in the middle of our show. God willing. And finally, we'll use that as a transition to move us to our next team. And I better just kind of crack my knuckles and get
Oh,
loose
boy.
for a second because
Here we go.
yeah, I got to make sure I'm ready because you're going to
Buckle in,
grill me.
guys. Buckle in,
Ugh.
everybody.
All right. So, the Seattle Mariners are my favorite baseball team. I
What?
just want to reiterate that for the record. So, of
No.
course, it would be totally inconvenient for me to come on with a platform like this and not swing for the fences on why they win this division. But I knew last year, as I saw our team trend downward nearing the playoffs, right before the explosive August, I said to Tiffany and to you, Dan, I'm sure in some conversation, I said, if we miss these playoffs, there will be widespread changes, and we are going to come back in 2024 with a fire in our belly and a huge chip on our shoulder. And I knew as we missed those playoffs last season how close we were and how 1 or 2 games was really all it would have divided us from a divisional championship and a total different narrative. And they went out, these Mariners, and they did a ton to improve whom they are. I'm excited to tell you why. I'm excited to tell you how. I do think this team has especially since the Astros seem to be signing Blake Snell, I do think this team has an outside chance to a playoff, and a pretty strong one at that. I do not necessarily deem them the division winners if the Astros pick up Snell. And I do think they're going to be battling the Rangers and the Toronto Blue Jays for a playoff spot every step of the way. But this is, bar none, most definitely a considerably better Mariners offense than it was last year, especially. We have the same starting rotation that is pundit by pundit admitted to be scary to them. Scary. One of the best starting rotations in baseball. We do have a bullpen that is limited with some injury concerns over Matt Brash and Greg Santos. But when those guys come in, we will have just as strong a flamethrower group at the back of our bullpen as any other team in the league. And I do stand by much of the rest of the arms in our bullpen, though they're a little unproven. That's where Houston has us there. I think we have them on the rotation. I really do. I think we have most teams on the rotation. And I love what we did with our lineup. So many different new pieces to break down. But I've done enough to set the stage. I know I ramble enough. Dan, go ahead. Introduce us to your take on these Seattle Mariners before I know I go through the grilling of a lifetime.
Yes, Seattle was on a tear last year and just couldn't really put it all together enough to make it in. And it's a shame and definitely something they do not want to repeat this year. And they know they're in a tough division. You're right. They did not slouch. Tons of transactions for this team. They lost a ton of players, let some walk, shipped some away, but they brought in just as many. It's kind of tough to say for me if this is better or not than last year. The offense looks better on paper, but a lot of trades, 6 new bats entering the lineup is, well, I don't know, Warren. It gives me pause because trades don't always immediately provide great results. And sure, you can expect that from a few of these guys. Definitely a couple of the ones that'll be starters like Polanco and hopefully Garver and Haniger. But sometimes it takes other guys a little bit of time, especially if they've only been with one organization in the past. So it worries me that Seattle had a good thing and they made a lot of changes. Not most of the group, but several members of the group are different, and it gives me pause before assuming that they're going to go on a similar or better run than they did to start off the year. But there is no doubt they have maybe one of the best rotations in baseball, certainly in the division. Even if the Astros get Blake Snell, edit that out if they don't. They still seem like the strongest rotation to me on paper, 1 through 5, including some of the depth coming out of the bullpen. Fantastic closer in Munoz. I think you would probably agree. There isn't a lot of downside. The injuries do hurt. I didn't realize, Warren, that Coar was getting Tommy Johns. That sucks because I thought he would have been a great addition and really helped a lot. But
Can I go ahead and say, yeah, we'll say that the Mariners knew they made a bad trade when they sent Jared Kelenic to the Atlanta Braves in exchange for 2 pitchers, one of them being Jackson Kowar, and the other also, by the way, taking on Tommy John surgery, sadly. Let's see.
yikes.
I will have to remind myself of that second pitcher, but we won't see them until next year anyway. So yeah, it was a bad trade. We cut finances to be prepared for a lot of the moves that we ended up making in the offseason to follow that. But I'm happy Jared Kelnick's off this team, and I think a lot of the Seattle fan base is either super thrilled about it or super disappointed and frustrated. But Jared didn't want to be on this team anymore, and I know we're not necessarily talking about him, but I did want to acknowledge it and get it out of the way. That while he just couldn't quite do enough consistently with the bat in his hands to make me miss him. And I know you had a relationship with Jared Kelnick. We actually have a pretty interesting topic there if we want to pause and set up shop, because that's one of the few players you and I get to talk about that made it through both of our organizations and we both had a standpoint on. But I think it's right for him to be in Atlanta. His walk-up song is "Take Me Home Country Road," and it doesn't fit for Seattle culture in a way. And I think it's a great synopsis of how he didn't fit in Seattle culture. His frustration, his immaturity, his inconsistency. He just didn't behave like a teammate. A teammate. He wasn't a good locker room guy. So I think he'll be more excited to work with stars like he'll work with in Atlanta. And who knows, maybe it will finally translate to consistency for him at the plate. But I'm not heartbroken on him being gone. Do you think we should be? I mean, you can have a take here.
Yeah, no, I mean he didn't make it to the majors for us, but we watched him in the minors and we were not seeing the level of consistency and the growth at the rate that we expected, which is part of the reason we traded him to Seattle. And you guys figured that out the hard way and definitely made the right decision moving on from him. And you're right, I thought he'd get kind of a second chance of Atlanta. I don't know if you saw, Warren, the Braves signed Adam Duvall to a 1 year contract. So if anything, Duvall kind of slots into their bench as the outfielder and pushes Kalenic even further out. So maybe he hasn't made an impact this spring like he had hoped to. And maybe that's the third organization that's coming to a similar conclusion on a player that was drafted and ranked pretty high. So kind of a shame, but I think good that we've both moved on from it.
You know what? I will say I am happy to hear you agree so staunchly on that. I am bummed to know Atlanta picked up Adam Duvall, because Adam Duvall is an excellent and postseason stabilizing type of outfielder and hitter. He tends to be on good lineups. and they tend to make playoffs. So I'm happy for them that they snagged him. I'm just a little jealous because I would have liked Wallace some in my outfield, and I know you would have too. That was one of the
Mhm.
last great bats left, and trust a friggin' Atlanta to be like, yeah, grab him. Jeez, more insurance, and they should have some because yes, Kelnick hasn't proven that he could put it all together. Why would this necessarily be the year where he does? And that's a real question that I'm sure Atlanta tried to answer with that signing. But going back to Seattle, the only other major piece that we traded away that I expected you to ask me about was Eugenio Suarez, our starting third baseman and the harbinger of all things good vibes only for the culture of our dugout and our locker room. And I will miss that tremendously. Please don't get me wrong. I love all players that have an outwardly outgoing, friendly vibe to them because I want to like my heroes. What can I say? And he was really great in 2022, excuse me, in 2022 to help us to the playoffs with his power. And even last season, I think a lot of my Seattle Mariner fan base faithful forget that he had like 10 games in a row with an RBI, which was actually a tie to a franchise record. So it's not like he didn't contribute. He just lost a lot of his power and he lost a lot of his consistency and saw his bat get deemed spent, if you will. The organization started to think, well, he's 32. He's not coming back from this. He's not going to be a better hitter next year or any other year. His bat speed is toast. And that Seattle justified the trade that way, as well as cutting costs to get ready for future moves. So, you have any? You want to flame my team for deciding to get rid of Eugenio Suarez?
Yeah, because all he did was take his team to the World Series. No big deal.
Well, we saw Eugenio went
Immediately.
over. Well, hold on. Are you certain you're not talking about Paul Sewald because he did, but Eugenio left Seattle in the offseason.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry. I thought he was part of that trade in the summer.
no, that was Paul
Ah,
Sewald
okay.
going over to Arizona for Zebby Savala. No,
Gotcha.
sorry, Zebby Savala went over in the trade of Suarez. Let's try again, one last time. Here we go. Ah. The Paul Sewald trade included Ryan Bliss, who is a prospect at shortstop for us, who should debut at shortstop or second base in the next couple years, and I like him. He's got some skills.
Mhm.
We also picked up Dom Canzone. Dom Canzone, he's going to be better than I think people think he'll be for Seattle this year. He's a bench piece prospectively. He's going to be a platoon guy with Haniger, who we don't expect to play every single game because of his own injury history.
Sure.
So you have those two guys switching off in right field. I'm good. Dom Canzone's great for us. And Josh Rojas. Josh Rojas also came over in the Seawald trade, and he's defensively the right third baseman for us, whereas Luis Urias, I think, is the more consistent offensive piece. So, real interesting stuff in our platoon, but I'm also just spitting a ton of stuff at people who probably can't keep up. Sorry, everybody. I've done a lot of homework on the Mariners. Go ahead, Dan. I haven't let you talk at all.
No, yeah, you're good, man. That this team does have a lot of exciting young pieces, and you see the budding core they're starting to build around. And what's coming up has been really good. You got Julio, you got Cal, you got a lot of these younger guys. Ty France I'll put in there, even though he's a little bit older. And it's time for Seattle to start reaping the benefits of all this. They've certainly made the moves to do that. I will say it's at a time where the division is very competitive in terms of the teams in Texas, in terms of the Angels trying to improve. Not that they are going to be better than they were last year, um, but it's interesting. I think Seattle thinks a legitimate wild card spot at minimum is up for grabs, and I think that they are a team that will pounce on anyone else that slips or flounders as the season goes on. So I like them. I think you're a little high on them. I'm not sure that they're going to be a stronger team than Houston or even Texas. But I tell you what, their pitching can dominate this entire division. And if they hold the other team to 1 run and you got Cal Raleigh hitting a 2 run homer every game, you're not worrying about too much. So definitely Seattle could trend towards the top of the division if everything goes right.
Logan Gilbert. Logan Gilbert's going to win the American League Cy Young
Whoa.
Award. Yep.
This year?
Yeah, Logan Gilbert. I'm going to say it one more time so it's clean on the edit. Logan Gilbert will win the American League Cy Young Award is my prediction, and I'm excited about it because I believe it in my gut. And
Okay.
on top of that, I think that the best reason for me to justify why Seattle is a different offense than it was last year is guess what happened yesterday when Seattle played the Dodgers in spring training baseball, my friend, against Yamamoto, of all people.
Oh, I mean, it's Yamamoto. He probably went strikeout for strikeout and took out the side, right?
He did in the first inning. He did. But the second time through the batting order, I watched the 5 pieces of our lineup hit single after single after single after single and start getting some runs on him and making him sweat and making him uncomfortable.
Mm.
And last season, I could maybe count on maybe both my hands of all the baseball games I watched of the Seattle Mariners, how many times I saw them string together hits in that fashion, casually bloop, 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 score, bloop, bloop. Like, it was beautiful to see. And that's how I know that if J.P. Crawford, Julio Rodriguez, Jorge Polanco, Mitch Garver, Cal Raleigh, Mitch Haniger, Dominic Canzone, Ty France, and Josh Rojas, if they can get some fluidity to the way they pass the bat around, this is going to be a team that offensively impresses as much as they do defensively. And if that is to come to pass, friends, and I know Julio is going to play like fire this year, so I know we're good for at least one of those. Um, guys, I really do think there's no reason for us to sleep on these Mariners any longer. I think they will come in completely transformed with a massive chip on their shoulder, starving to prove that they're the best team in this division, even if they don't end up proving it. But I think that it's on their side as long as health remains on their side. So go Seattle Mariners. You guys deserve this. I will see you rise. Tridents up. Playoff bound. I'm telling you. I'm not going to say division bound, but playoff bound. We are not going to be the best team to miss the playoffs this season. That was last year, not this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I mean, I think that if the bullpen overperforms, I think Seattle definitely can lock into a wild card position. So we'll see how it
Oh, yeah.
goes.
Yeah. I think Ryan Stanek will help us stem some of those runs. Gabe Spire is not my favorite third person to slot in here, but I do have faith in Saucedo. And then when Matt Brash and Gregory Santos heal up whatever, thankfully non-super serious injuries they're dealing with, this bullpen is scary, as scary as most of the others out there. Maybe Houston still got us, but maybe Milwaukee is still kind of scary, but I'm not scared at all. You're like, no, no. I thought Milwaukee had a really strong pitching system,
They
so
did, but
I couldn't
Williams
help.
got hurt and then just pushed everybody back, and now it's not.
Okay, well, then let's go Mariners. I have so much faith, so I can't wait to see if it pans out even a little bit. But if
Yeah.
it looked like that Dodgers Seattle game from yesterday, if it looks like that every 3 games, then I think we're a playoff team for sure.
Well, Warren, take it from a Met fan from 2023. Don't
Mm.
don't put everything on your expectations. Just be prepared for anything. It's a long season. We'll check back in July and make sure you're still conscious.
I'll never forget the story you told me about your experience as a New York Jet fan dealing with the fact that Aaron Rodgers uh, had his season end as you got beverages for your viewing party. Like literally, I
Yeah,
went to the bar to get a drink, and but I came back, the season was over.
it was done.
So I get it. I get it. I definitely do. I pray that, well, I feel like last year was kind of that for us. So I'm praying we're on a good karma year this year. So we'll see. But I respect the warning. And there's one more obstacle, of course, Seattle would have to overcome, besides those fire truck and Astros. We have the defending champions in our division, too. the team that led the American League West for the majority of last year's baseball season, before at the last minute letting them give up that title because of the Mariners beating them a couple too many times, actually, to the Houston Astros before the Texas Rangers met them in the American League Conference Series, that Houston Astros Invitational, and actually won. Wow! Look at you guys. Their first World Series these Rangers had, or really their second, right? But their first World Series victory. And third World Series appearance is the number you're showing me? Yeah, but first World Series victory. So
Yeah, they
congratulations to
lost back to
them.
back.
Yeah, they bust back into the playoffs. They win it. And I know you and I were buzzing a little bit near the end of last year because it wasn't Houston that was winning it all, and I was rooting for them to have a good World Series, and they certainly did. Adolis Garcia, like how can you dislike this man? How can you not root for what a cool story he's had coming up as a veteran through several organizations and being cut by St. Louis to go to the Rangers, and the Rangers allowing him enough patience, right? Really, because he didn't get off to the best start during the season. It was the playoffs where Adolis Garcia created a legend. So they've been a great story. The Texas Rangers win the World Series last season. They're our final team to discuss. Very poetic of you, Dan, to cue it up this way. They were second in their division, though, as I said, with 90 wins and 72 losses. And now they don't necessarily have Jordan Montgomery yet. You wonder if Montgomery will come back to them eventually, though many people still think he's a shoe-in for Boston at some point eventually. But you don't have Montgomery, who was, I don't know, dude. I don't think this team gets anywhere close to the World Series championship last playoff if they didn't have Jordan Montgomery pitching the way Jordan Montgomery did. Um, Him and Eovaldi were indispensable to that run. Absolutely indispensable. But they do have some pieces that you can trust to remain stable even without Adolis Garcia's postseason version, even without Mitch Garver, who, thank you, signed with the Mariners, and he's excited to be part of the Mariners organization. They do have maybe my favorite young player to keep an eye on this lineup has got to be, oh, I've got two. Jonah Heim. I like Jonah Heim as a steady hitting catcher and a great defensive player too. Still on the younger end, he could be very important for them. But I also really like Evan Carter. I mean, where did this kid come from? Evan Carter doesn't seem to swing the bat incorrectly. He gets a hit every chance he gets. He is so good. And he's aggressive on the base paths, aggressive on defense. Those are the players that I think of first when I think of why I still don't want to play the Texas Rangers. Talk to me about how you think the defending champions look a little bit, though. And again, I'm super sorry. I've really rambled on about this division today. I totally apologize.
No way. It's a big one, dude. There's a lot going on. And you're right. This Texas team just surprised everybody. And how could you not root for them a little bit last year? I had a couple of my New York Mets on this team, and Jacob DeGrom and Max Scherzer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Both of them got a ring. Neither of them did anything to really earn it. Scherzer started the only game the Rangers lost.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you know what? They had a great run last year, and the bats got hot at the right time. Garcia, as you mentioned, Garcia did sign a 1 year arbitration, so he could be a free agent next year. But they got him
Mm.
back this year. They return a lot of the same pieces that they had. A couple other of their younger prospects will get an opportunity. But yeah, even the rotation, I would say, is one of the stronger ones, rivaling Houston. If they do go out and sign Montgomery or Warren, I'm sorry, but Seattle and Texas rotation would really be right there. I'd probably still give the edge to Seattle, but Texas has a really strong rotation. They've lost a few names out of the bullpen after their World Series, but they brought in a guy like David Robertson, and Kirby Yates is another name coming in for like the 7-8 innings. Leclerc is their closer, so Robertson will probably share closing duties and fill in that 8 hole. That's going to help out a lot since they don't have the starting pitching strength or the bullpen strength that they did last year.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, while the bats are still pretty strong, I don't know if the whole lineup is as strong as they last year. You mentioned they finished with a 90-72 record, same exact record as the first place Houston Astros. So certainly they think that they can win the division this year, and I'm sure that's what they'll set out to do. I definitely think that they have enough pop to get out ahead of the Astros early on, but the Astros
Mhm.
have more depth. So it's tough to say if they can come out to a division and really hold on to it. But certainly coming back, looking to defend their World Series, Texas is in a position where they can make a trip back to the playoff.
Hey, well, if they do, again, I hope it's not at the expense of the Mariners more than anything, but they do have some of the most exciting bats that I forgot to mention around them, like Marcus Simeon. We also see Josh Young maturing with this team. And they have an exciting rookie, right? Wyatt Langford. Want to talk to me about him? As injured as he is to start the season, I believe you have him circled as a major reason to tune in to watch Texas baseball.
Yeah, definitely. He's overall in prospects in baseball, he's ranked number 2. He's their number 1 prospect. Got it in his DH right now just to give him some playing time, but he is an outfielder, so there will be an opportunity for him to get time out there, and he will have an opportunity to win a role. Just waiting for his stats because I'm pretty sure he's already taken some at bats in spring training. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, super exciting player. Already a team that has a lot of bright pieces, and like we've seen Houston do in the past by supplementing their championship roster with exciting youth. This is the player that Texas is going to try and do the same thing with to run it all the way back.
Yeah, and that's important. You got to input new youth even as you sit atop the mountain because teams can't get to know you too well. You you don't want to get figured out, and especially a lineup, pitchers might hone in on weak areas of their strike zone, weak areas of their hitting chart, and just start focusing in on each player fairly mechanically. So adding that new talent always helps shake things up and make it a little bit more interesting. They have this kid projected to mash at 24 home runs in his first year. There's a lot of faith behind Wyatt
Mhm.
Langford. And Leota Taveras and Ezekiel Duran are also great contact and power hitters almost interchangeably, especially I would say Leota's got more power potential, but both can put ball to bat and are both very stable in defense. There aren't a whole lot of glaring weaknesses, but I'm not super sold on the starting rotation past, honestly, Eovaldi and Gray. I like Andrew Heaney, but Heaney's extremely streaky. He used to be an angel for long enough that I paid attention. And I mean, I want to like him. He's one of my pitchers on some of my MLB The Show rotations, but he is streaky for real and will give up runs in chunks. So I don't put him all that high in a pool of pitchers in this division. Dane Dunning, therefore, and Cody Bradford behind him, they don't instill a ton of fear. So I think this team, this is all the lead up to this point. I think this team is one signing away from really underlining how prepared they are to defend their championship, and I think they may swoop in and grab Montgomery at the last minute here, any minute, and take him out of the jaws of Boston. Because while I know there's some interest to play for his home field or his home team, I think the Rangers should just pay the man who really set the table for them to win that World Series and dominate the playoff as much as they did. I don't think I've ever seen a pitcher pitch as often in postseason play as I feel I saw Montgomery do so for Texas this past year. Like he won them the World Series in my mind as far as the pitching side of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I wonder, have you seen a pitcher pitch as perennially on that path? I mean, I know a couple guys were doing it last year. There was Eovaldi and there was Mantiply and Kelly. I think it was Kelly on the
Yeah,
other side.
dude,
They
I was
pitched
just
a
gonna
ton, but
just point to the other side
yeah.
in Kelly, and now of course I'm blanking on the other starter for Arizona
Oh,
that got them all
Eflin.
the way there.
Eflin. Gallon.
No, yes,
Gallon.
Zach Allen, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, Gallon did it for him, but as huge as it would be for him to come back, even if he doesn't, Warren, Tyler Malley, Max Scherzer, Jacob DeGrom could all come back this year and be on the playoff roster. And at that point, with the three other starters you have, I think you're looking at a really good rotation. And granted, that's a full health, and they're not there right now, and they might not ever get there. But I think eternally, Texas can take some reprieve. Like, okay, maybe we don't sign Montgomery, but we got these other guys who we're
Yeah,
paying a lot of money to come back,
yeah.
and we're no slouch.
So the point is, though, they need to let their offense get them out to a hot start. And like you said, they would need to get past Houston and Seattle enough to have some breathing room, much like they did last season, to be fair. And then instead of needing to trade their way around setting themselves up for a playoff run, they're instead banking on injured players coming back to do that. But some of those injured players aren't. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I can just look it up and triple check. But yeah, these guys are getting up there in age. DeGrom
They are.
and Scherzer, especially, man.
They are.
So it's harder and harder to rebound as you get to that point. And the last thing you might want to do is for them to try to rebound, because I remember Scherzer got lit up, for example, the last time he returned from injury for them, right? So
Yep.
he can be running out of 9 lives. But that's the kind of storyline every player and every team and every organization is going to be looking to capitalize on, that everybody's got at least 3 or 4 of, right? Capitalizing on these different issues. So the chess game will be interesting, and all eyes are on Texas, so the pressure's on. We'll see if they can rise to the occasion. So, it's all 5 of our teams broken down. The bases are covered. They're loaded at the moment for us to grand slam our way to a prediction on the division. I'm just going to say it one more time. I do think my Mariners are playoff bound. And I would be wrong, as someone who has a platform to say this, I would be wrong to my team base or my fan base and my fellow team. Sorry. I would be wrong not to say the Mariners are going to win the division. I have a chance to say it, and I want to. I think the Mariners have the scariest rotation in baseball. I think we have a far better lineup. I think we are going to offensively impress while the pitching does everything that's expected of them. My one concern is the bullpen. As long as we get our bullpen pieces back, Brash and Santos, that is, relatively soon into the season, and we don't have too many sad and inhibiting injuries throughout, even if we take a couple that we project to guys like Haniger, I still think we have enough. I think we have enough, and I think we have a chip on our shoulder large enough to impress everybody and win this division. And I'm going to stick to them. Who do you think is going to win this division, Dan? The pressure's on.
Well, Oakland is tempting, I got to tell you, but
Yeah, I don't blame you. They
yeah,
could.
man.
Wait, Oakland? What's wrong with you?
No, man, I cannot, because I'm also a baseball fan, Warren. So I'm not a fan of the Houston Astros. I'm gonna go with the Texas Rangers. I think that they're pissed they didn't win the division last year, and I think that they're gonna go out and take it this year. And I think Houston is still gonna be a good team, but I think they'll just struggle. I think that they're gonna have a little bit more difficulty than they have in years past. I hope they do anyway. And I hear what you're saying on Seattle, man, and I think that they could be right there and sneak in for a wild card spot. And I'm right there with the rotation too. We talked about how every team needs an average of 12.7 starters, and every team is going to be tested not just by their strengths but by the bottom too. So I'm not going to put them at the division title, but I will say that they're right there for a wild card spot.
Yeah, that's true. I was going to say, I was blown away by that statistic because I don't think Seattle used more than 7 or 8 starters last year. Like, it was definitely lower than the league average. And I feel we're a little spoiled for that. And I do know that maybe Emerson Hancock is our most tantalizing 6th arm that might start a game this year. But after that, I don't have a ton of faith in the unproven arms that make up our extra starters that we might need. So you have a point there. That's where depth maybe bottoms out on us. But to have the 5 guys we have in our starting rotation that we do have, including Bryce Miller and Brian Wu, who have looked ready to step forward into new territory of aptitude this season, I'm hoping that with health on our side, we really won't need to worry about that. Kind of like we really didn't need to worry about it last year, but I know that's a lot to ask for from the baseball gods. So,
Mhm.
I tip your cap to that logic. And Texas, man, they're right, but I'm a little worried about those guys. They might get back an injury, whether they'll be a liability or not. So, we both have good reasons to believe what we believe. Do you see, one way or another, do you see two wild card teams coming out of this division? Because I think it's the most likely division to get such of a situation.
Definitely. Uh, I think that it's not a lock that it'll happen because I don't think we saw it happen last year, but I think there's a stronger chance for it. Definitely. I think that there's so much competition amongst the Central that they'll probably be pretty similar amongst the top three teams in win total. Usually, when that happens, the top team gets it by virtue of winning the division. And then you look at the other divisions and you find that the top four teams have more wins than every other team in that one. So, yeah, I think Seattle is in a good position to lock it up. Two wild cards is the expectation. If it's just one, though, Warren, maybe Seattle jumps in front of Houston and takes it, knocks them out of the postseason after making every ALCS for the last forever.
It's really a three-way horse again, like the three horse race. It really is. And last season, I knew looking at the end of the Seattle schedule how like 10 of our last 14 games or something were against Houston or Texas, something stupid like that. A lot of games, divisional games to close the year. Like I knew it was going to be one of those teams to miss the playoffs at that stage, and you know, it all depends on what Toronto can do. A similar team that's really going to be sprinting for a playoff run and is right on the
Mhm.
cusp of being able to justify it. You know, I don't think any of the American League Central teams can hold a candle to Texas or Seattle or Houston, right? I don't think any of those five teams are as good as they are. And I think it'll be interesting to see if the Yankees or the Orioles, who already have their own injury concerns, really prove to be as high as they will be. I mean, the Yankees are especially, I'm eyeing you with that topic, New York. So yeah, it's going to be really close between the teams we've just talked about, and it's maybe somebody will surprise us, and who knows? Maybe the Royals are a wild card team. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
some other divisional winner in the Central make us bite our lips. So it's a very very fun. I mean, I think it's a fun conference. I like being an American League fan, but I do think the National League has maybe pound for pound a little bit more potency amongst the top
I think
teams,
so.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, It'll be fun. But our predictions episode's next, Dan. That'll be our next recording, friends. So buckle up and let us reiterate some of what we just said. Maybe something will change. Not my faith in Logan Gilbert to be a Cy Young Award winner, though. We'll find out more predictions for the upcoming season for that episode as we get going. And what do you think, Dan? Are our bases covered?
We covered him, dude. We're good. It's time to make our predictions, jump into the season, and start staying up to date on all the teams in the league.
Did we cover all your bases appropriately? Maybe you should let us know down in the comments if you're excited about Oakland's transition out of Oakland and towards Las Vegas. If you think this lineup is one you do want to tune in so you can watch your Rookers and your Geloffs get off, put us a little note in the comment below and let us know that you're not sleeping on Oakland like we are. Maybe put a comment below if you are totally tired of Anthony Rendon and concerned about why Mike Trout is not as passionate about baseball, clearly, as he was when he first came to the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Yet you still believe that the young core out there for the Angels is enough to take a step forward and shock everyone and earn a playoff run this year in Major League Baseball's American League West. Let us know in the comments below if the Houston Astros are your least favorite team too, and you're tired of the Houston Astros Invitational and you're dying to see this incredibly strong team start falling apart at long last. Let us know in the comments below. Let us know in the comments below if my Seattle Mariners have stolen your heart, or maybe it was just me. And which of our starting pitchers you think will be the Cy Young Award recipient, because it's going to be a Mariner. Okay, Jack Kirby, Luis Castillo, I'm talking to you. Let us know in the comments below how great we are as a Mariner fan base. I love it. And finally, let us know in the comments below if you are thinking those Texas Rangers are going to run it back and do one of the hardest things in sports, and that is be a back-to-back World Series champion. Hasn't happened in a very long time. So we'll see if this is the first time in a while. Let us know how they do that in the comments below. And also let me know if you agree with me in that, Max Scherzer coming back won't necessarily be a good thing. Okay. So thanks everybody. This has been Covering Your Bases. Dan, the dastardly one, and I wish you well. We'll see you next week for some preseason predictions.